what's going to show up in the next 90 days is a question for you to ask yourself right now based around yourselves. But this also pertains to every other stuff that you're doing in your business, every other challenge that you're trying to overcome. What I've learned in my business journey and what I help a lot of business clients understand is that whatever you do in the next 90 days will show up in the 90 days after that. And so equally, whatever you don't do in the next 90 days is going to show up after that. So the point being is that the activity that you put in place over the next 30, 60, 90 days is going to show up after that next period of time. Equally, if you stay the same and you don't make a change, that's also going to show up for you and you're not going to get the results that you're hoping to get.
This is the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners looking for cool online tools, apps and strategies to make business easy online. My name is Nick Cree and I'm your host. Each episode features a guest expert demystifying the online universe, sharing inspirational ideas and providing tested real-world strategies to help you get the most of what's available online to grow your business today. Don't be a slave to your business, get your business working for you. Subscribe now and get some great content and ideas for you and your business today. Now, let's get down to business and find out why those clients that you talk to, you have great conversations with, never want to speak to you again. And it's nothing to do with sort of how nice or how terrible you are. There's all sorts of reasons in there. We've got the man in the room that knows what those reasons are. More importantly, he knows how to solve it as well too. So we've got Torrin, who has been in this field for about 30 odd years, both in the field, in the trenches there, in sales, and he now works with businesses, helping them to overcome some of the issues that are there. And he does it quite successfully as well too. And his business is high level sales, right?
High level selling. Yep.
High level selling. So let's welcome to the stage, Torrin Minutilloi. Did I get that right?
You did. Yep. Close enough will do.
Fabulous.
Thanks, guys. Well, firstly, thanks, Nick, for the opportunity to chat your wonderful group and anybody who may be listening to this after the event. For me, I'm the founder of High Level Selling. I've been, it's about 6 years now since I started my coaching career. And I'll share a little bit more about my story as we go through. But firstly, I just want to say I'm grateful for you guys taking the opportunity to take some time out. And I know most of you are probably on the East Coast. I'm over in Western Australia, so it's still only 4:30 over there. It's probably a bit closer to beer o'clock or wine o'clock or whatever's going. So don't let me stop you digging into whatever's going on in your world at the moment. My background, I'm a varied background, but I do love talking about human behavior. I'm a student of that, neuroscience, and have done for a long time. And so the basis of what I do now is founded in that. Now, try not to be too technical, and probably my topic today is going to highlight why I don't necessarily want to be too technical. But what I'm going to say is at the start is that today's session, which is probably more of a training session than a presentation or whatever, but that's the label I'm giving it. It's really about realization and not about transformation. So sometimes when you come to these things, you're looking for the big silver bullet that's going to help you. But really what I want to do with my goal today is just to help you come up with some realization around your sales process, how you may be performing at the moment, how you're showing up for those sales conversations, and give you some insight, as I said, some realization about maybe how you can do it a bit better. So it's not about getting all the detail I'm going to share with you today. It's about understanding what resonates with you based on where you are on your journey right now, because sales is a very personalized process and it's really situational based on, what your marketplace, what your niche is, who you are, how you're showing up, what's your relationship with selling, what's your sales cycle. There's so many variables. So one of the things I don't believe in is a cookie cutter approach. Yes, you need a framework, you need something of substance that you can go to, but sales is about being adaptable to who shows up in front of you at any given time. If you want to be able to connect with them at a deeper level and help them make a decision that hopefully is going to buy your product or service. Now, at the core of every sales process, it's about helping your prospect get a better life by buying your product or service. No person ever buys a product or service that they don't believe is going to deliver them a better life. So if you can tie in your value proposition, what you offer to your prospect, with them getting a better life, whatever that means to them. So your job is to figure out in the sales process, how is my value proposition going to give you a better life? And when you can connect those two together, you're starting from the right place. So if they can't see that they're going to get a better life from your value proposition, you're already starting on the back foot. And it's a hard work to try and move them forward, because you're starting on a defensive mode when you're trying to help someone see why your product or service is going to help them in their life. So what I'll be sharing today will be perfect for you if you're a multitasking business owner, right? So the people that I like to work with and I help the most is not big sales teams. It's the multitasking business owner who's got a lot of balls in the air. And if one of those balls in the air happens to be the ability for you to be able to convert your opportunities as they come to you, whether that's through a marketing effort or whether it's through word of mouth, is that what happens is a lot of business owners just step into the sales role for that little moment in time. It might be 20 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, but then they run back to everything else they're doing, all the other balls they need to juggle. So really what I'm looking to help is people understand how to get better at selling by connecting and not with their prospect and who they're trying to connect with. So it's also particularly important if after you make the sale, a relationship is required. In other words, the person's buying your product or service, but really they might be spending another 3 months, 4 months, a year, 2 years. So in other words, you're going to have a relationship. Like Nick, for instance, if you come on board with Nick as a client, most likely you're going to have a relationship with Nick over a period of time. So what I'm going to be sharing with you around human behavior and how this impacts the connection, keep that in mind, that if you've got a product or service that requires a relationship after the sale, this is going to be particularly important for you. So before I get too further deep, I'd like to understand who's in the room, just to give me a level of understanding. So I've got a couple of things. Firstly, just if you can just say where you are, which part of the country, or I did hear that someone was from Bangladesh, so that's obviously not in Australia. But then just answer these two questions for me. Are you predominantly selling a product, or are you selling a service, or potentially you might be selling a product and service? So if that's the case, just write down 2. And then on a scale of 1 to 10 in the chat, 1 is I don't really need any more sales because I've got more than I can handle, or 10 is I'm really desperate, I need to figure out how to convert more. And maybe somewhere in the middle is, hey, I'm going okay, but I can always improve. So just give me cool. So Melbourne service, fine, that's good. Nick is in service business, yep. So programs, consulting, yep. Gold Coast, cool. Brizzy, there's a few people in Brizzy. From a remote little Thai village. Wow, cool. Thanks, Peter. Cool. So we've got a bit of a range of people there. So I think, look, so really, understanding the distinction between whether you're selling a product and whether you're selling a service is also a good thing to really understand. So Toowoomba in service, Newcastle, yep. So a lot of East Coast. I haven't seen anybody from Perth yet. So Nick, we've got to do some work on the Perth side of the country. Rev up some people over here. Cool. Okay. Nice crowd. Thanks. I've got a good idea now of where everybody sits in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through some slides with you. We'll duck in and out of that, and hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to be able to share, ask some questions, and I'll be able to hang around if anybody else wants to hang around afterwards as well. So let me just get the technical part of this up and going. And Nick, I'll rely on you to give me a thumbs up, mate, because I can see you. We all good? Cool. Yep. So sounds okay, and you can see the screen. So cool. So what I'd like to do over the next 40 odd minutes that we have is to really go on a exploration about the lifeblood of your business, and that is converting your sales opportunities. This really forms the lifeblood of every business. So you might be really good at delivering your product or service, and you might have great business systems, and you're really good at operating processes. You might have a good marketing system, particularly if you're working with Nick and you're getting good exposure and you've got lots of opportunities that come in your way. But without the ability to have a reliable framework and to convert your sales opportunities, this is to win long-term valued clients, which is what most of us are looking to do, then all the other skills don't matter if you don't have a reliable system on converting sales processes. So, what I like to think about is that running a business is like running a problem factory. So, and in my 36 years of running my own businesses, I've learned that cash flow fixes a lot of problems. Now, I also understand that, cash flow or revenue is vanity, and really what we're chasing is profit, which is sanity. But your starting point really is to be able to at least get revenue coming on a regular basis, get people paying attention to your value proposition so that you can make some sales. Your job then is to optimize that in lots of different ways to be able to get the highest profit and get the impact for the effort that you're putting in. So that part that you want to be able to get profit is really about having a refined sales system, which is what it's meant to do. So nothing creates more stress in your business than the lack of consistent money coming in. So I can speak about this firsthand because about 17 years ago, I ran into the global financial crisis and I lost a lot of the gains that I'd made in my first 19 years in business. So you guys who are good at and clever at maths, you can figure out that I've been around for a while. I started my first business in 1989. This was before mobile phones and internet, let alone all this AI stuff that are coming at us at 100 miles an hour at the moment. So it's actually hard to imagine a world like that and doing business going back 36 odd years ago. So from about 2009, I spent 3 years of my life stressed about the lack of money coming into my business. So for me, I really got a taste of what it was like not to have money coming in. I had a young family that I was trying to look after at the same time. But I'm not going to bore you with all those sad times that I had back then in 2009 through to 2012, because my story is really one of redemption and what is possible when you invest the time into learning the new skills that you need and putting them into practice. And as one of my dear coaches often used to say to me, is that you've got to do the drills to get the skills. And understanding that you're never going to get good at what you're not doing were the two of the most profound lessons that I ever learned along my journey. So if you take nothing away from what I'm sharing with you today and you just implement this, and that is that you've got to do the drills to get the skills, and that you're never going to get good at what you're not doing, this will help you a lot on your business journey. So now about 14 years since those tough times, my business life is a dream that I couldn't imagine at the time, and I have the financial freedom I have. And about 6 years ago, while running my commercial real estate company and also a property development company, which I still do have, I decided to start a coaching career and helping other business owners just like me at the time that were trying to figure out, what I figured out. And what that is about connecting the human experience with the business experience. And when I started to do more of that, things really changed for me. So I really went into it quite deep. And I ended up the last 13 years spending a lot of time on learning the human experience and connecting it with the business experience. For some reason, my experience talking to a lot of business owners is they tend to separate what's happening as the human experience with the business experience. But we take our human experience with us everywhere we go. And the more you can connect the two together, the better connections you'll make, the better relationships you'll build. And for me, over the last 13 years, it's helped me do deals well over $1 billion in sales, whether it's in property development, whether in sales or in leasing of commercial property. And that's B with a billion, with a billion with a B. So at the core of what I learned and drove my business success is that sales success is human and it's not financial. And that's really the core of what I help people understand now, is to understand that if you really want to improve your sales processes and your connection with other humans, it's about making sure that you understand sales success is human success, not business, not financial success. The financial success is a byproduct of how well you connect. And what I learned over those 6 years of helping other business owners is that most small business owners didn't get into their business because they were good at sales. They got into their business on a likely pathway that was more about they were good at delivering their product or service or something they were passionate about, but not necessarily being able to sell. So what happens is that they understand that selling is an important part to drive revenue in their business, but they've never had any formal training of it. And in some cases, actually don't have an identity that they think connects with how to be a salesperson. So hopefully what I can share with you today is that you don't have to be a salesperson. You have to be a human connector. But at the same time, you understand the importance of this. So I understand your business life and how you feel. So this leads me to the actual topic that I want to talk about today. So that was just a bit of a background to who I am and how I got to where I am and why I'm talking to you guys. But really, I want to talk to you about overcoming sales ghosting and how do you convert like a pro. So I'll just share this. So don't you hate it when you have a really good sales meeting and you think everything is going really, really well, and it sounds like a slam dunk and you're feeling really good about yourself when you're having this conversation. And then, so when the person sort of says on the other end, or the person that you're talking to say, look, let me have a think about it. I'll go away and I need to talk to a couple of people. You're feeling pretty relaxed about it because everything went so well. But then there's this deathly silence and they disappear like a migrating whale towards the South Pole, never to be seen ever again. And in the end, what you end up doing is you start to feel like I'm confused, I'm frustrated. And what happens is your confidence starts to drop in what it is you're doing. And you start to get into the judgment mode. And you start to judge every conversation you have with these things. It's like, did I answer all these questions well? Did I handle the objections? And handling objections is a big topic in itself. I prefer to build a system and a process that objections don't come up in the first place. But you start to wonder, did I handle the objections of that person in the sales course when they ghost you and they've disappeared? What did I say that they didn't like? You start to go over your conversations over and over again and go, what was it that I said that seemed to upset them that they're not even talking to me now? So you end up, what did I forget to say? Did I leave something else? Was there some critical bit of information, like as if one line was going to make all the difference to what you had to say that's going to keep them connected? Maybe I didn't explain myself well, which is often what we start to think. We start to think, well, if I actually maybe I explain myself a bit better, I might be able to keep them connected with where where I want to go with this. Or is that maybe you end up at this place where my price or service fee is too high, and invariably you end up back at a judgment of maybe my pricing system is not good for me. And in the end, all your focus, all these questions are really focused on the merits of your product or service and how well you've expressed yourself. And there's nothing in here that talks about how you've connected with your prospect, because all the judgment is self-judgment about your information that you're sharing. So what often happens is that you default to becoming even louder and then start to go into, I want to convince you what it is I need to convince you. So in fact, instead of backing off, you tend to go a little bit harder on the next occasion, or maybe when you get an opportunity to talk to the person again. This actually leads to more people repelling you rather than you think that you're going to be helping them. So what ends up happening is this is what I would call information selling. And it's at the root cause of ghosting. So the big key takeaway for today, or one of them, is that are you an information seller or are you a connection seller? And what I'd like you to take away from today's conversation is that there's a realization that maybe I'm more of an information seller, and that's actually what's causing the ghosting in my sales processes. And often what happens is, from your client's perspective, they see your presentation like this, is that you are trying to become an expert. And the more you are trying to become an expert, the more you default to information selling. And we often get trapped into wanting to look like an expert because it makes us feel good. What you really want to be doing is creating yourself as the authority figure and staying composed with conviction, not information overload. So the danger is of being too intellectual, too quick in the conversation, is that your prospect can feel inferior to you, and this all happens at an unconscious level, and they start to see you as superior. And what we know around human behavior is that we are attracted as humans towards authority figures, but we repel superiority. So if you're coming across as an information seller and too quickly as an expert, which is a bit contradictory to what a lot of people teach, is that you actually can come across, particularly if you don't know the person very well, as superior, and they will start to unconsciously shift how they feel about you, and you'll start to move away. So you don't want to get trapped into becoming an expert too quickly in a conversation. So what happens when you are putting all this effort into, but the conversion remains low? You end up impacting the two things that as business owners that we think about the most when we go to work every day is that impacts the time you have and the money that you're making. So you don't make the money that you feel you should be, and you waste a lot of time on missed opportunities. So stress on your time and money makes every other little problem in your business a whole bunch worse. So if you've got other challenges in your business, remember business is a problem factory, so there's always a challenge. But when you've got time and money pressure, it makes all those other problems in your business a lot worse. And invariably, what I've come to understand is that it's not a lead and opportunities are really the problem. It's you stuck as an information seller that we have to shift to be able to make the connections that we want to make to be able to get things. And I'm going to go through a framework that's going to help you understand this at a slightly deeper level. So your biggest question today is, what are the consequences of doing more of the same? If I stay on the same pathway, how is this going to show up for me if I don't make a change and I stay on becoming an information seller and I don't shift away from that, or at least have the realization to look into it further? And so what's going to show up in the next 90 days is a question for you to ask yourself right now based around yourselves. But this also pertains to every other stuff that you're doing in your business, every other challenge that you're trying to overcome. What I've learned in my business journey and what I help a lot of business clients understand is that whatever you do in the next 90 days will show up in the 90 days after that. And so equally, whatever you don't do in the next 90 days is going to show up after that. So the point being is that the activity that you put in place over the next 30, 60, 90 days is going to show up after that next period of time. Equally, if you stay the same and you don't make a change, that's also going to show up for you and you're not going to get the results that you're hoping to get. So why are we defaulting to information selling? This is a good question. And how is it even causing ghosting after the sales? So let's look at what the science. So this is about the bit where I go a little bit geeky and talk about neuroscience. So hopefully I don't lose you glazed over here. But I really want to just share with you as best I can in the time that I have what is actually going on that causes us firstly to default to information selling, and then secondly, how is that actually contributing to you to getting ghosted after the sales? So our nervous system has two primary objectives at the very, very core. The two things that it most wants to do is keep us safe and connect so we can thrive. How we've thrived as a human race over millions of years is by us staying safe and connecting with other people, on the planet. So that's how we've been able to thrive. And at the very core, it signals two basic feelings, and that's pain and pleasure. So your nervous system is always looking at its core for these two basic feelings: is this painful or this pleasure? And what we're trying to do, the feeling is created these building blocks of all our behaviors. So all our behaviors are built out of these building blocks, and that is to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. So we are constantly moving in this direction, and that's what our nervous system is doing. So every behavior is built from these two basic motivations. Now, I'll just pause here. If you think about this a little bit deeper, that if all behaviors are built out of avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, this is one of the key self-awareness tools about yourself, is to understand, where is this happening to me? Where am I avoiding pain and where am I seeking pleasure? And then the bigger question to ask is, how is that serving you? Is that serving you well to get what you want, or is that not? And I think this is really a self-reflection process. But deeper than that is that when you're trying to connect with a prospect to help them, buy your product or service, or at least show them why that is the right option for them, is that they are also built in this same way, and that is that they're looking to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. So when you understand this at a depth about yourself and then of the people that you're talking, you are already way advanced in understanding human behavior than what most business owners would be. So this would be a topic for you guys to go away and spend a little bit of time on, because it's going to serve you very well in the future to be able to understand this at a deeper level. And I'm more than happy to share that with you. So we default to information selling because it makes us feel safe. So remembering that we want to feel safe. So why do we do that? It's what we know and how we feel comfortable about expressing ourselves. When we know all our product service at a deeper level, we feel comfortable about talking about that, and that makes us feel safe. So the logical conclusion is I'm going to go and talk about my product or service at a depth that I understand it because it makes me feel safe. The challenge or the problem is that it doesn't make your prospect feel safe. What you're doing is actually pushing them away from feeling safe. And what we want to do is to connect another human, is to make them feel safe as possible. So this leads to them disconnecting, because the more you talk about your information, particularly at the front end of the conversation, the more they are getting disconnected with you. And it's not necessarily a intellectual disconnect, it's a internal emotional connection, because it's just a feeling that they get. And that's a big topic in itself, which maybe on another day we can have a one-on-one conversation about that. I could share that with you at a deeper level if you're interested. They don't get a good feeling and they play the avoidance game, right? So the avoidance game is really what ghosting is that if I don't get a good feeling of having a conversation with Nick after he's explained to me how he can help me, I'm going to avoid that pain, which I don't want. Whereas if I have a good feeling about Nick, having a conversation with him about his marketing service and how he can help me, and I feel safe with him, I trust, I'm going to be looking forward to the next conversation. So I'm not going to avoid pain, because Nick represents pleasure to me. Take that with what it is as an example, right? But we don't want to get off track. But my point is that at an intellectual level, we can understand everything we're saying, but if I don't feel comfortable, feel safe with Nick, I'm most likely not going to want to talk to him again. So I go into this avoidance game, which is the ghosting. So you are creating the ghosting within the conversation that you haven't, without even realizing it. So the mistake, or the simple mistake that we make, is that we ignore the need for connection, which is where I want to take this conversation to now. And that is that, connection is even more critical when you have a relationship after you make the sale. And I think I mentioned this earlier, is that if you got a product or service where you have a relationship after the sale, what we're going to get to here is understanding that your prospect is actually judging you because you represent the danger. It's not your product or service or the information. Your nervous system, which is the emotional system that's making the decision, and I'm going to use you, Nick, as a topical example. The reason I'm going to connect with Nick is because I feel safe with Nick. And as I feel safe with Nick and I feel comfortable, and I know I'm going to be judging what's it going to be like working with Nick, not at an intellectual level, but at an emotional level, at my nervous system level. It's all unconscious, but believe me, this is how we connect with other people, is that the starting point is, do we feel safe? Because that's biologically what's built into us all. We won't change that in our lifetimes. So what's the distinction between a sale where a relationship is going to be required? So the best way to separate this is to look at, is it transactional? In other words, are you buying a product or service from me that when you hand over the money, I give you the goods, and there's most likely not going to be a relationship afterwards. So that's transactional. There's still importance why you should connect with that person, but the distinction is, do you have a sale where a relationship is required after you make the sale? So the reason why this is important is, I just want to reiterate it again, and that is because you are being judged on how your relationship is going to be. That person's predicting how your relationship's going to be over the next 2, 3, 4 months. So if you're selling a coaching service that goes for 6 months, for instance, what's unconsciously being judged is, what's my experience going to be like with that person over the next 6 months, not necessarily the detail of what they're sharing with me. Now, the detail is supportive of how they feel, but unconsciously at a depth, the emotional system doesn't understand words, it only understands feeling, and it understands the tone of those words, which is the reason why I think the data says that only 7% of the words is the core of communication. The rest of it's made up of how that person feels, your body language, and what's going on is unconsciously, this is all being taken in, whether I feel safe with you and whether you're going to push me towards pain or to push me towards pleasure at a very basic level. So hopefully that's a understanding of the distinction between the two. So to overcome ghosting and convert like a pro, we need to minimize information selling and we need to expand on connection selling. And there's a cool reason we want to expand on connection selling, because it's what cultivates self-persuasion. Now, the reason why this is important is self-persuasion is the number one form of persuasion. You know yourself is that when you feel good about something and you want to buy the product or service, you go into the mode about why this is good for me. You don't need the salesperson to tell you that. So what we're trying to do is create a framework that allows the person to feel connected with us, feel safe, and then they start to self-persuade why this is a good idea. And that's the framework of high-level selling or what we're trying to achieve. And there's four distinctive things that you want to be achieving when you're doing this. And the first one is the framework needs to subdue 10 to 1 negative bias. So as humans, we all have a 10 to 1 negative bias. It doesn't mean that you're a negative person. You can be the most positive person on the planet, but your nervous system is built to be wary of danger at any given time. And in a sales process, the person who is selling a product or service to you, they represent the danger. And so what we're trying to do is cultivate the self-persuasion by subduing the 10 to 1 negative bias. And I'll share with you soon my framework on how we do this. So the other thing we want to do is create unconscious safe states. So I've talked already a little bit about this. So a safe state is the biological term for what we use as trust. We call it trust, but trust is really, do I feel safe with Nick? Then I will trust him. If I don't feel safe with Nick and what he's telling me and how I feel about him, I'm not going to trust him. And every relationship is built on that, is that, do I feel safe? So we want to create a framework that allows this cultivation to happen. It also increases suggestibility. So the more you can get the person in self-persuasion mode, the more you're going to get to when you say, here's what I think you should do to help you overcome the challenge and the problem you have, is that when they feel safe with you and they're cultivating self-persuasion, it increases that suggestibility for them to follow whatever the lead. Remember, we want to follow authority figures. And if you can represent an authority figure into whatever your problem is that you're solving. And the best way to think about this is to think about when you go and talk to your doctor who refers you to the heart surgeon. The heart surgeon is the authority figure in that dynamic, and you're most likely going to follow the suggestibility of what they say you should do. That's what we want to create in a sales process, is where you're the authority figure. You want that person to feel safe with you, and so they're going to follow your suggestion. The last thing I'll mention here is that we want to create a positive filter on the predicting brain. So our brain is always looking to predict what's the future going to hold for us, good, bad, or indifferent, but it's always predicting. So what you want to do is create this self-persuasion will come about is if you can create a filter, how they feel about you, and then through that filter, they'll look at whatever your product or service is in a positive way, because they're predicting that if I buy this product or service, my future is going to be better. Does that all make sense? I'm just going to drop the share for a minute and take a breath, take a drink. Is there anybody got any feedback or comment around so far? Have I gone too fast? Give me, I know we're pressed for time, so I'm trying to get through this content. Anybody? Nick, go on. Give me something, mate.
All right, let's have a look in the chat here. Love the neuroscience. And I like that you can't be good at what you don't do. I like that as well too. So anyone got any questions? Just come off mute, come and ask, put your hand up. Or
yeah, just more so to give me a break, and then I'll go into the last bit. Let me have a look in the chat. Is anybody asking anything? All good. All right.
No,
that's good. We've got some neuroscience fans. I love it.
And in fact, you got Steve there who got excited when the fax machine came in.
All right, I'll get back into it, or we can always ask some questions at the end. Let's let me get back to. So we're covered. So what I want to do now is I just want to share with you the framework that I use to help my clients understand this at a deeper level. Now, obviously, this is a framework that I pull together that fits onto one PDF file, right? And I said to Nick earlier that happy to share this with the group later on, and I'll give you the best ways to use this as a tool in your business going forward. But I just want to unpack this for you, and then I'll and get you to understand it. Look, obviously with the time I've got today, I haven't got to go in depth with how this all comes together, but I just want to give you a framework so that you can utilize as a tool going forward and see how it works out for you. So the first phase of the
Just say,
conversation.
Torren,
Say again?
you're on the wrong slide. You're on the presenter view, on your view, not the presenter presenting view.
Okay. What have I done? So let me stop the share for starters. Is that better?
That's it. Perfect.
Cool. All right. So the first phase of the framework, so there's 3 phases that we want to work out through. The first one is a rewind conversation. So at the start of every conversation you have going forward from now, I want you to think about, instead of what most salespeople do, and that is they meet the person at where they're at based on what their problem, and they quickly want to move forward from where they are on what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve, and where they want to go. So that's a forward-paced conversation. What I'm suggesting in a framework is that we go backwards before we go forward, and what I call the first frame as the rewind conversation. And as an example, one of the questions I like to ask at the start of my sales conversations, or even when I meet someone, and Nick, you can vouch for this because I did it with you when I first met you. I said, so Nick, tell me where you were roughly 5 years ago, and tell me what happened from 5 years ago to now. Just give me a bit of a snapshot of your life. And what this does, I'm getting Nick to talk about his self, his business, and I'm going to do the listening. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement the things that I need to do in the first phase. I'll come to what that is. The second phase is, once I've done the rewind conversation, the middle phase is what I call a consequence bridge, because if there's no consequence of change, most people won't make a change. So we need to build a consequence phase. And then the last phase is the results-centric solution. So every conversation, we want to break it up into these 3 things. And this is the framework that becomes adaptable to whatever your sales cycle is. And we can get in depth in all that and how it's different for everybody. Your ideal market, whether it's a 2 conversation sales process, whether it's a 1 sale call, whatever it may be. But the framework is still the same. Is you start off with a rewind conversation, you have to have a consequence in the middle, and then you focus on whatever the results are of your solution, not necessarily the solution, because really what they're buying is ultimately the results that you're going to give them. So in this first phase, it's all about being prospect and problem curious. You really want to get them to express themselves. As I said, a good question to ask, and you're happy for you to use it or is to implement and go. So let's go back to where you started. How did you get to this point? And what you're doing now is that you're implementing all these things, and that is you want your prospect to make them feel understood. The more you ask them questions about where they've been and where they've come from, and you repeat back to them potentially what they've said to you, they're going to start to feel that you understand them. You also get an opportunity to validate someone's journey and make them feel significant. These are 2 of the primary drivers we all have, that we all want to feel significant, we all want to feel validated and approved. So when I'm hearing Nick's story as an example, and he tells me about something that happened 3 years ago that was good or whatever, I validate that and I make that feel significant about him. What's that doing? The more I validate, that shifts his internal nervous system in, geez, I like Torren, because he's validating my story or what it is or the challenges I've had. The next thing you want to do is you want to connect commonalities along the way. Somewhere in that person's story, you're going to find something that resonates with you. And I'm not talking about building rapport because our kids went to the same school. I'm talking about something that was a challenge that Nick overcome in his story that I can relate to, that I overcome, or I potentially help someone else. So I'm creating that commonality. And the reason we want to do that is because we've been modeling this ever since we were 2 years old, is that we attract ourselves to people like us and we repel ourselves from people that are not like us. So if I can connect some commonalities in that first phase, I'm going to shift unconsciously Nick's internal nervous system towards wanting to like me. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to get below the surface of whatever the problem is. Most times when you meet someone and you're asking them about their challenge or where they're at and how you can help them, they'll give you a surface level problem. And that is because we're built to protect ourselves. We're all wearing a mask and we only want to give out as little information as possible, and we give out the surface. But through the ability to learn some probing and curious questions, as I call them, you can get below the surface to what is the real core motivator of why it is you want to buy a product or service that's going to give you that better life, right? And in that first phase, you also want to expose what their desired goal is. So you want to understand what is it that you're trying to achieve. What's if everything goes, a good way to frame this up, which a coach shared this with me, is if everything goes well on Planet Nick in the next 3 years, what does that look like? Tell me what the goal is that you're looking to get. So you can phrase it up. You can use a little bit of, if you got a good personality and a bit of humor in there is always good as well, because nothing relaxes the nervous system more than humor. That's why laughing is good for you. So that's everything that you want to achieve in the first phase of, and I call it the rewind conversation. The middle phase, which is critical but not as in depth. The most in-depth part of your sales conversation should be the front end, because that sets everything up. Is what is the consequence of not making the change? You really want to ask your prospect, now that they've told you what their core problem is and what their desired result is. So what happens if nothing changes? Will continue in the same path, resolve this problem that you're looking to resolve. And then what you want to do in the middle is create two futures, one with your product or service. In other words, without even telling them what your solution is, hey, if you implement what I've got to share with you, your life is going to be like this. If you stay the way it is, it's going to be like this. And then what you want to do is raise the upside of working with you or buying your product or service, and lower the downside, as in, heighten, making it as worse if they don't do anything. So this is all around consequences, because what we know about human behavior is that unless there's a consequence of change, most people won't change. So you have to understand, and ideally from a self-persuasion perspective, and I can give you the dialogue of what to use, is help them express themselves that staying the same is not going to be good for me. When you can get them to express that themselves, that's when you know you're on a winning pathway. Okay, so the third phase, as I said, I'm going to send you a PDF of all this so you can use it going forward. So don't try and memorize all this now. But the last phase is about the future result centric. So what is my life going to be like with the results that I'm going to get from buying your product or service? So this is only at this stage do you want to introduce the solution. You don't want to be talking about your solution until you get to the stage where there's a consequence of change if they don't do anything. So if you don't get that consequence, I would suggest that you build the front end of your sales conversation much deeper and get practiced at helping people bring to the service what's their consequence. So you introduce the solution, you connect the better life to that change, what their life's going to be looking, because ultimately they're looking for a better life. You just got to find out what that represents to them. You're going to align the core motivators. So for instance, as an example of this is that you might be selling them a website, for instance. They don't really want the website. They want the results that the website's going to give them, right? So if the core motivator is, I want to make more money, I want to get more sales, I've got to, put my kids into private schools, so I've got to turn over the next $5,000. That's the core motivator. So how you connect that to your solution is going to have a huge impact on whether they move forward and you start to self-persuade. Now you want to collaborate, what I call collaborate the emotional and the illogical. This is a bigger subject in itself, but the emotional system is making the decision, but the logical system needs to be aligned with the emotional system. When the two are aligned, there's no disconnect and you get self-persuasion happening in a natural process. And then at the end of your sales process, you want to provide a predictable pathway. What's going to happen in the next steps? And what I help people build is a 4 to 5 step process of what happens next, because the next phase of this is what your logical brain is going to want to go and know. It's going to want to know what happens next, how's this all going to go, how's this all going to work out, so that it can be soothed by the emotional system. So pull that all together and it looks like this. So this is a PDF that I'll send you. Now the two ways that you can use it right now without any further education is to use it as a tool going into your sales conversations to see, okay, let's start practicing. I want to start with the prospect problem centric, and I want to at least pick 2 of these things out and I want to start getting good at. And that is just making maybe your prospect feel validated and significant about their story, or even do the rewind, so go backwards before you go forwards. And then the other way, so you can use this as a tool going in, okay, I've got to go to the problem, curious, stay there, I've got to go bring out a consequence, and then I want to get future case results. So what is it in my product or service that it adapts to potentially what this person might want? The other way you can use this is as a review process after your conversation. So you've had a sales conversation, it's gone for an hour, half an hour, three quarters, or however long it's gone. And then when you go to review that, go and check these boxes. Say, did I do this? Did I not do that? What can I improve to do next better? And so on and so forth. So this one-page document, you can pin it up on the wall, whatever you want to do with it, and use it as a process of a review. Now, in all this process, the one that is the most significant is the starting point. It's the rewind conversation. It's where you build the most connection and where you're most likely going to make your prospect feel safe with you and start to trust you. So I want to highlight 3 mistakes to avoid in phase 1 that most people who are not experienced in this will make. And the first one is less talking and more listening at the start. Because there's 2 reasons why we don't want to be talking too much at the start of a sales conversation. Firstly, if you are doing all the talking in the start of a sales conversation, you are leaving the opportunity for the person to cultivate that 10-to-1 negative bias because their nervous system is on alert. What we know is that when your prospect is talking, that 10-to-1 negative bias doesn't cultivate. It subdues because they're not going to be worried about you when they're doing the talking. So if you've got a framework of questions that you can ask at the start and do this rewind conversation, you're going to be doing most of the listening and none of the talking. What's going to happen is you're going to subdue that 10-to-1 negative bias. That person starts to feel comfortable, they feel relaxed, and they're more likely to engage with you and start to connect with you. The other reason why you don't want to be doing this, that if you're doing all the talking at the start of a sales conversation, there's only one thing that you can be talking about, and that is about you, your product or service, how well you can do it, and why you have the answers to sliced bread, right? So, and at the moment, they're not ready for that. They're not ready for it at the start of the conversation. So you want to avoid talking too much at the start. And that's something that you can practice. Resist talking about your solution in phase 1 and even in phase 2. Is that what happens is we get caught in this solution dropping where as soon as they say something that they have a problem about, the challenge they're facing, you go, yep, I've got the answer to that. Let me tell you about how we fix that, how we do that. And what you're doing is you're shifting the energy away from them and back to you. And that's what's actually creating a disconnect and not moving them towards you. The solution can come at the end, not at the start. And one of the biggest problems, there's a whole bunch of other mistakes, but these are the ones that are the common ones, is you minimize their priorities. Because we're experts in the field of what we know and do, we think we have all the answers to their solution. And what you tend to do is ask them what their biggest challenge is, and then you minimize their problem. Which is so into them, the reason they're expressing you what their problem is because it's a priority to them. So what you want to do is raise that priority and how you're going to fix it and not minimize it. And a lot of salespeople, particularly business owners, do this. They fall into the trap of saying, no, don't worry about that. We can fix that. You don't need to worry about that. And as soon as you say, don't worry to someone about something, the more they'll worry about it. Right. So now this is a little framework that I use as a success criteria to understand connection strength. And what I would suggest in anything that you're trying to improve in your business is that if you're looking to improve any part of your business, whatever it is, create a success criteria around it so that gives you a guide of how you can do things better. So a good sign, so I'm going to go through these quickly, but a good sign in a good sales conversation with good connection strength is that you're moving below the surface level. If you're stuck at the surface level, you haven't connected very well with your clients. So remember, they'll always present with a surface level problem and you're okay to talk about that, but you then want to have your curious and probing questions to go in below that. And there's a framework that you can use for that. So when they're responding to these probing and curious questions, you now know you're starting to make a connection with them because they're responding to not the surface level, but something that sits below that's really causing the pain in there. Remember, they're looking to avoid pain and get pleasure. So we want to, as a selling process, we want to highlight that pain, what it is. And usually the pain sits below whatever the surface level is that they're talking about. That's your job to get there. You want to, when you get them talking about whatever their core motivator is, that's a sign that they're starting to trust you and open up to you even more. Agreeing that the consequences of change will make things worse. If you can get your prospect to express that no change is going to not be good for them, that they need to make a change, and there's consequences associated with not making the change, They're trusting in what you're saying and they're buying into what you're saying. Acknowledging the gap of the future states. If they can acknowledge to you that, yes, my life won't look as good if I don't make a change, and it will if I do, that's a sign that they're buying into you and they're connecting with you at a deeper level. Asking clarifying questions about your solution. When you have started to get to the solution mode and they're then leaning in and asking you what I call clarifying questions as versus objection questions. So questions is, I want to get out of here, I want to get out of this conversation. Clarifying questions is, I need to know more and I'm getting close to make a decision. Can you just clarify something for me? And then the last one here is if they start to respond yes to a micro commitment, and this is another topic as well, is how you build out your sales framework, is to create little micro commitments that move them forward in the sales process, particularly if you've got a long sales process that could take 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 conversations. Even within a two conversation process, you can have a micro commitment that takes you from one to another, as an example. All right, as we round this up, I just want to share a couple of success stories of recent that I'm working with guys. So Gagan Gupta, he's got an interesting business called Turn Left for Less. So he helps people build points so they can get at the pointy end of the plane. And he's got a great system that helps you evolve that. And it's basically a service-based business where he coaches you on how to do this. The challenge was that he was too much of an information seller, too much technical on how to do it. So what we did was shifted him away from information selling more towards connection strength. And his conversion in the space of about 2 to 3 months went from 1 in 10 to nearly 5 in 10, and it's increasing all the time. So he didn't have any problems of leads because he's selling a product or service that a lot of people are interested in. So as soon as he started marketing online on Facebook and starting a good campaign, he was getting 30 or 40 calls a month to talk to. The problem was that he was spending a lot of time on these calls and not converting. Now he has less calls but more conversion. So here's an example of how the shift from information selling towards connection selling made. And Gagan had a long history of selling other products or service in a sales environment for a long period of time, but this was quite new to him. Gia Lee, she's got a digital marketing business. She's an Australian girl, but based in Berlin. I worked with her, but she was doing the classic show and tell pitch, which is just the classic information sell. I'm going to show up, I'm going to throw up. I'm just going to tell you everything I need to know about what it is, and I'm going to hope that you understand what I understand. And when you understand the logical part of what I understand, you're going to say yes to this because it's a logical conclusion. So what we did was we stripped that right back and shifted everything from a 1 call to a 2 call, created the micro commitment in between. Now what's happening is a conversion rate. She was another one that was doing 30 or 40 calls a month. Now she's doing 10 calls a month and converting 5 or 6 of them. Because what happens is through this process, when you start to get confidence in your conversion process, you start to get more discerning about your client. And as I say to a lot of my clients is that productivity starts with client selection. So the more that you can select the right client at the front end, the higher and quicker you're going to get the productivity and the profit that you need. The last one I'll share with you is Derek. So Derek was a classic old school seller, hard-nosed. If they don't say yes in that first call, they're never coming back. And he self-perpetuated, and this is exactly what happened. If you didn't get him to say yes, so he was like the car salesman, pin him in the corner, don't let him out the room. If they go out the room, you'll never see him again. So really the work with Derek was about shifting his belief system, which is what happens to a lot of people around here, is in shifting the way they think about sales is really about shifting your belief. Because one thing we know about human behavior is that your behavior will follow what you believe. And if you believe that 1 call sale has to be the way, your behavior will follow that. But when you learn that there's a different way to do it, so what we did with Derek is just shifted it out now so that he really resonated with the self-persuasion part. And the more that he worked on how to make people more self-persuasion, they started to come back to him after the second and third conversation. He didn't have to do any chasing. And he's now flourishing in his business, selling a product which is hair solutions or how to regrow your hair. He's got a business here in Perth. Okay, so the key takeaways from today for me, or for you to take away, is we are complicit in creating those ghosting conditions. So If you're wondering why ghosting is happening to you, the first place to look is not at your prospects of why that's happening. Look at what you are doing, because you actually are creating the conditions for that to happen. We want to minimize information selling and expand on connection selling. And the more you can connect with another human at a deeper level, the quicker you're going to make the sales that you're looking for. Your connection strength will determine your sales success. So the more you can cultivate connection strength, the more you're going to get people saying yes to you, and you don't have to do much of the selling, and self-persuasion kicks in. And the three-phase framework is really built around cultivating self-persuasion. All right, let's wrap this up. So hopefully you would agree that you've learned something different today, or what I've shared with you has resonated with you. So where to from here? So apart from the door prize, this is available to anybody who's interested. Is a complimentary 60-minute session, which is what I call a situational coaching session. There's no obligation to do anything after that. And what happens in this conversation for 60 minutes, we do an audit on what you're doing. I give you a strategy to implement, which will be aligned with the three-phase sales framework. And then what are the action things that you can do in the next 30, 60 days that you know are going to start to give you benefits in the time after that. So thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully that's of interest to you. Hopefully you've got something out of this today. I know we're running a bit short on time now. We've got to 5:30, but I'm happy to hang around for a little bit longer if anybody else has got any questions and wants to share. So I'll hand the mic back over to you, Nick, to wrap us up.
Fabulous. Excellent. Excellent. So no pressure there, Torrin, but there's, I think there's about 3 or 4 other sales gurus in the room as well too. So
yeah, I know. I'm happy to. I'd love to hear from them, actually.
Well, actually, you did get some good feedback in the chat there from some of them. So there's Peter, who's in Thailand. He does some very effective sales coaching. Of course, we've got Steve Brossman here and Janine Vosper as well too. So all of them are have got their sort of own take on it all as well too. I think all quite aligned. Janine.
I just wanted to thank Torren. It's always great. I always come on it's particularly when there's salespeople on, Nick, because everyone's got a different way and a different approach. And I learn something every single time. I've been doing it for 30 years, and because people explain things differently in a different way. So thank you, Torren. I really enjoyed that.
Appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's not about having all the answers. As I said at the start, it's really about bringing some realization to where people are at on their journey. And I'm specifically, my niche is working with business owners. I'm not really interested in working in sales teams. I'm interested in helping business owners who are multitasking overcome their challenges. So sounds good. Steve.
Yeah, buddy, great stuff. Really enjoyed it. Love the science behind it, all the stuff that you're doing there. And just like Janine, we get better by learning from people like you, and that's why we show up.
Cool.
Quite often people say, well, you're a sales coach. What are you doing here? Learning.
Absolutely. Well, I spend the majority of my time, trying to craft it, and I'll be open with you, Steve. My challenge is getting the information in a package form that people can understand and implement. That's always the biggest challenge. And as I say, sometimes it depends on where you are in your journey. It either resonates with you or doesn't, and that's okay. It's like, and I think it's just, but as I said, if you're a multitasking business owner and you've got 6 or 7 tasks to do every day, stepping in and out of sales without any formal training or at least some help is very difficult to do.
Yeah. Great job. Loved it.
Cool. Thanks for that, Steve.
100%. And we've got a question in chat there from Wesley. What if a customer straight away asks you for the price of the products before going into the 3-phase conversation? How do you approach that?
Yeah, well, so my approach to that is, look, this is now me, because the other part of all this in behind, it's like the psychology, is dropping your agenda, right? So you need to drop your agenda, go, look, I don't even know if I can help you yet. I really need to understand a little bit about what you're looking for to see whether it's worth even talking about the price or anything else. I really want to understand if I can help you first. So what you're doing by doing that is you're dropping your agenda. And actually also what you're doing is, because the reason why they want to ask the price is because their internal nervous system is on alert. Can I afford this? Is this guy going to charge me too much? All that stuff's going on. So from the psychology of sales and around human behavior is that if I can drop my agenda as quickly as practically possible in the conversation, and the best way to do that is, I don't even know if I can help you. I really need to understand a little bit about how you've got to where you are, because we may not be a good fit. Unconsciously, what I'm doing is dropping my agenda of wanting to sell you a product or service. So if that person pushes and persists, I would say, or for me, it's not a good fit straight up. Because they're trying to be transactional. And again, depending on what your price, I need to know a little bit more about this, but depending on what the product or service is, because if there's a relationship that's required after the sale and the person's only asking about the price, then they're not concerned about the relationship. They're concerned about the price, which is transactional. So you, as the seller of your product or service, got to make a decision. Remember that productivity starts with client selection. Not every customer is a good customer. And so I would help that person understand, if you're getting that up front, it's either something of how you're portraying, how your marketing message is potentially attracting that type of client that's going to ask you that question. But yeah, I would flip it. My method would be to drop your agenda by saying, I'm not sure if I can help you out. So hopefully that answered the question. The person who asked that, who was that?
That was Wesley.
Wesley, thank you.
So we've got old one. I think you're the lucky last question.
Excellent. Thank you, Torren. Really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
My question is around the point about less talking, more listening from the start. What are some questions you would ask at the beginning to get the conversation going, to like specific questions to really draw out how you can best help someone?
Okay, so a best way to start a question is by prefacing it with, I'm curious to know. So I'm really curious to know, like I said when I spoke to Nick, so I'm curious to know, where were you 5 years ago? How did you end up doing what you're doing now? So Nick went on to tell me about his process for that 6 years. So asking curious questions, most people will lean in to offer up a curious question. The other point to make about this, Aldrin, is that people are very comfortable often in talking about what's happened to them going back, less comfortable talking to someone new about where they want to go. So if one of the first questions you ask someone is about, so tell me what your goals and ambitions are. What are you hoping to achieve by blah, blah, blah. So they go, well, I don't even know you yet. Why would I want to? Whereas if you said, so tell me what happened to you 3 to 5 years ago that got you into this position, the past has happened. I can relate to that a lot easy, because, I'd be interested to know from the group, and you put your hands up or whatever, is like, if you meet someone new, are you really open to telling them about all your dreams and what it is you're trying to do and what are you trying to achieve? Most people will feel not comfortable in doing that with someone they don't know. But if you've had a conversation with someone for, say, 15, 20 minutes, and you've validated and made them feel significant about the questions you ask him, and then you ask them about, so what are you hoping to achieve? Now I'm a bit more connected with you because you understand. See, one of our human addictions is the need to be understood. So we all have an addiction for the need to be understood. And when we meet someone who actually curiously asks, and you've got to have an empathetic tone, you've got to feel, you can't be just, you've got to be present. So often salespeople do is they ask a curious question, but then they're distracted with what's going on. And your intellect may be able to get past that because you keep talking and you keep telling the story, but your nervous system is disconnecting straight away because this person's not interested. They're not really paying attention. You know what it's like. This is my pet hate, actually, to highlight this point, is going into the supermarket and you go to put your stuff through the checkout and the person on the other side is talking to someone else while doing your transaction. How does that make you feel when you're about to hand over money to buy a product or service when the person or the shop assistant's actually having a conversation with someone else at that same time? And so what's happening is intellectually everything is happening, but your internal nervous system is saying, this doesn't feel good or doesn't feel right. And as soon as I can get out. So that's what's happening in a sales conversation. And the point I want to make and really get people to understand is that our unconscious behavior drives our decisions. We want to get past the gatekeeper, which is the intellectual system, and get into that emotional system. So what I'm offering is helping people understand how to do that as a window into that. And the more you can connect to the unconscious decision-making process of someone, that's where self-persuasion. So go back to ask your question. I think it's just asking curious questions. And I would encourage everybody to do this based on this framework, is come up with 3 or 4 go-to questions that are curious about your product or service, what you do and why. Because if you're selling marketing services or if you're selling websites or if you're selling internet services, everybody that's going to talk to you is going to have a challenge in and around what you do. So have prepared a couple of curious questions around their story and why they are likely to be there, and you will find that people will start to open up on a regular basis. But you can't just have one, you've got to have 2 or 3 up your sleeve.
Oh, I love that. And then the trick, of course, will be to watch people going into their drama about the past, right? So then being able to pull them up on that, so you don't hear a half-hour whinge about what got them to this point.
Well, again, this is situational based on whatever your product or service is and what you're trying to, and there's definitely a skill to it. Yeah, like I've had this happen to me. So I say, so tell me about your past. So tell me how, and the question comes back. So how far do you want me to go back? And I go, as far back as you want to go, right? So give them, some people, you'd be surprised how many people say, well, I went to school in such and such primary school 35 years ago. Gee, I didn't want to go that far back. But the point is, another person's emotional system, their nervous system, will calm down when they're talking about their self and their journey. That's the key point here. It's like we want to connect with someone who's in a relaxed state. And the biological term that I use is it's a positive emotional state. So the other thing to take away from this too, Aldwin, is that you have to be in a positive emotional state to be able to bring someone across to that. You can't be in agitated, a bad energy, a negative emotional state, being rushed in the conversation, but yet want that person to open up to you. It doesn't work that way. Human behavior is that I'm going to get attracted and open up to where it feels safe. And if that other person doesn't feel safe to me, I'm never going to. That's why conflict resolution is often about calming that person's nervous system down before you start talking about the problem. But if you raise the stakes, all you're doing is aggravating and you're keeping this thing going. In a sales conversation, we want to calm it down. All right, guys, I know we've been pushed over time, so thanks for hanging around. And if there's any more questions, I'm happy to stay, but I know everybody's got to get on with their life tonight.
All right. Well, before any more questions there, let's draw the door prize. I know everyone's sort of hanging around waiting for that, and I've got a prediction. I think it's going to be one of the other sales coaches that's going to win it. So let's prove me wrong. Always happens.
That could be good. Well, let me tell you what it is. So the door prize is one of the first things I do if I'm working with a new client is I do a 2-session audit. And it's so what that is a deconstruction and then a reconstruction. The first session for 90 minutes is a deconstruction. There's a set of 10 questions that I ask the person based on their situation and go through. So what we do is we unpack everything that's happening. And then I go away with that information, come back generally a week later, do the second one, which is the reconstruction. And that's when I help them identify their client audience, exactly what they should be saying, how to connect with them better, and to start building out a framework that helps them move. So the 2-session audit, I normally charge $1,350 for that, but I've made that the door prize for tonight. So spin the wheel, Nick.
Fabulous. Let's bring up the wheel. You've seen this before. Everyone's name is in here, so stick around and let's see who our lucky winner is. Let's hit spin on the wheel. And there it is. It's going, it's lagging, it's coming along. And our lucky winner tonight, Paul Kennedy. Is Paul in the room?
Absolutely. Hi there, Nick. And goodness me, I'm being a bit lucky in recent months, haven't I?
Paul, are you a sales coach?
You probably wouldn't call me a sales coach. I'm more around strategic planning, business development, but kind of headed that way, Torren. I'd love to take up this offer. In fact, Nick, you may remember I was so embarrassed last time I won, which was only a few weeks ago, because I'd won previously as well. I, in fact, threw it back into the room, but I'm not going to do that tonight. So thank you, Torren.
You're welcome.
Excellent. You're on a bit of a streak at the moment, Paul.
Yeah, well, I should explain. I've actually got my name on your spinning wheel there about 7 times, so that might help explain it.
I noticed all those registrations coming through.
Excellent. All right, so the other, just finally for me, is the audit strategy session. That's a little bit different. That one is just more of a bringing awareness to what you're doing. What we're talking about, and I'll do with Paul, is going a little bit in depth about exactly his cycle, very situational, because I think, as I said at the start, I don't believe in cookie cutter situations. It's very situational to exactly who you are, what you're doing. And the more we get connected with that, the better we can connect with our ideal client. So thanks again, guys. That's available. I think, Nick, you'll put that in the chat or in the follow-up email. So if anybody wants to take advantage of that, you're welcome to.
Yeah, it'll be in the chat. We'll also put it out in the email that goes out very shortly after this is finished. So once again, thanks to Torren for coming on. I'd like to say thanks for the late night, but it's only early for you. So it's
Yeah, it
getting
is.
towards-
Yeah. Not 6 o'clock yet. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So the chat, just remember to save the chat. There are 3 little dots on the top right-hand side. Go and save it. It's got the links there for Torren's PDF and all the other links there. Plus, if you want to connect with anyone here and they've dropped their details into chat, it's a good opportunity to connect them on LinkedIn. Let's go and find each other on LinkedIn, at least connect there. We'll be back here again next week, same time as well. Oh, and I should say, if you want to watch this again, or if you know someone else that would like to, that you think should see this as well, it'll be up on the Smash Go YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. If you are not subscribed to that, head over to YouTube, just search for Smash Go. Links in the chat as well too, and go and connect there. If you click the bell after you subscribe to it, you'll get a notification as soon as it's uploaded as well too. All right, well, that's a wrap for tonight. So thanks, Torren, for coming on.
All right,
thanks
appreciate the opportunity,
for joining us as well too. And look forward to seeing you all again next week. Have a good
Cool.
night.
And Paul, I'll reach out to you via Nick to get your details, and we'll tee it up.
Much appreciated. Thanks, Torren. Thanks, everybody.
We'll connect both by email as well too.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, guys,
Great.
over and out.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast. You can also find me on social media and online. Just search for Business Owners Smashing It Online and Nick Cree, spelled Nickcree, all one word. If you like this and want to hear more, subscribe now. Until next time, don't be a slave to your business. Get your business working for you.